Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading.
Ken, I had there. Okay, our opening video hung up. Friends, I'm sorry we are a little bit late tonight. The reason we're a little late tonight is because a lot of news stories were coming in at the last minute, just before airtime. There's a lot of stories tonight between Thursday night and tonight, and there wasn't video for one of the primary stories I want to give you that relates to that MERS virus that is spread throughout, that's going on in Saudi Arabia, mainly. 133 people have died since 2012 there with that. We've got a story on that for you tonight. And friends, I've actually signed on live here without having all of our things ready to go. Our news story, I wanted to go right into the tornado strike in Orrick, Missouri that's hit there. Just tornadoes hit in Arkansas just a few days before that, and President Obama visited Arkansas on May 8 or May 9. I've got video on that for you. And then here, just last night, tornado strikes Orrick, Missouri. I have friends in Missouri. I hope you brethren there are all right. And bear with me just a moment. Friends, we'll have our news stories loaded up and ready to go as soon as I can think through all the things you have to push to do this. And I do this a lot better when I'm not on the air live, having to do it. Okay, we do our best to get on the air live every night, friends, even if we're not always all the way ready to really go with it. Just so we'll be here for those of you that tune in live. I missed the mark tonight. I apologize. We'll do our best to be on time in the future. Now, we will not be here Tuesday night because for brethren in my church who observed the Passover and who may have missed the first Passover, one of my responsibilities in Pasadena was to help Roman Boric. He and I every year opened up the recital hall for the second night to be, for the second Passover. And I'll be conducting that this Tuesday night, the 13th of May. That's the night for the second Passover this year. If you know anybody who missed the first Passover, needs the second Passover, they can tune in here just after sunset in each time zone in the United States and in the UK too. We'll be running the live stream. And we'll have Mr. Robert Collins introduce Mr. Armstrong hosting the last Passover ceremony memorial with the foot washing service this Tuesday night. Okay, let's go into the first story. Tornado strikes in Orrick, Missouri last night. It ripped through a small town in Missouri, severely damaging homes, downing trees and power lines. The tornado struck Orrick Saturday night, last night. Local media reported that there had been no injuries or fatalities, thankfully. And with the story on that and some video by one eyewitness, Paul Schmidt, in the neighboring state of Kansas, who filmed the tornado, here's this video.
Well, the rest of this is dark, but it doesn't look bad.
Yeah, that's definitely a rope tornado.
And Friends, I believe the eyewitness, Paul Schmidt, thank you for this video, Mr. Schmidt, Paul. He presented it through the BBC. You're just going to see scenes of some of the devastation there. Again, local media reported that there had been no injuries or fatalities. Orrick has a population of approximately 800 residents and lies around 30 miles, 50 kilometers northeast of Kansas City. And again, the eyewitness, Paul Schmidt, in the neighboring state of Kansas, provided this video footage of the tornado. Thank you. Thank you again, Paul Schmidt. And then, friends, just a few days before that, Obama visits the tornado-hit area of Arkansas. They got hit previously. Now, this is from May 8th. Today's May 11, so we're looking at Thursday. On Thursday, President Obama visited Vladimir, Arkansas. Actually, on Wednesday, where the day before, on Wednesday, a deadly tornado flattened all but 6 homes in one neighborhood.
Here in Valonia, the recovery process is just beginning. It's especially difficult because this town has seen more than its fair share of tragedy. Almost exactly 3 years ago, another tornado leveled parts of Valonia, and some families and businesses had just finished rebuilding when they were forced to start all over. But folks here are tough. They look out for one another, and that's been especially clear over the past week. Immediately after the tornado hit, about 200 people, including fire crews from other counties, were ready to go house to house searching for injured neighbors. Some survivors were driven to the hospital by complete strangers, and in the days that followed, thousands of volunteers showed up to help remove debris and hunt for belongings, pick up trash, deliver supplies and water. And one volunteer, 16-year-old Casey Williams, did such a good job coordinating relief efforts that Arkansas state troopers started taking orders from her. I had a chance to meet her, and she is extraordinarily impressive. So I don't know what she's going to be doing in the future, but I know it's going to be something great. You know, more than any disaster, it is that dedication and that commitment to each other that truly defines this town. As one resident said, we just say a prayer and then get to work. So the people of Valonia and all the other towns devastated by the storm understand there's a lot of work that remains to be done, but I'm here to remind them that they're not doing this work alone.
Friends, the storm tore across the suburbs of Little Rock on the 27th of April, killing 15. Mr. Obama thanked residents for supporting each other during a difficult time, but said he wanted them to know they're not doing this work alone, as you heard him say here. Now, he arrived there on May 8, Thursday. The next day, on May 9, he flies to California, where while he was giving a speech at a fundraiser there, he was interrupted by a heckler. And this is while speaking at a Democratic National Committee fundraiser in California.
We've got to seize it. And if we do, then I guarantee you, I agree with you, although why don't I talk about it later, because I'm just about to finish. You and me, we'll talk about it. All right, I'm going to be coming around. There you go. I agree with you. I want to hear from you. I love you back. You kind of screwed up my ending, but that's okay.
Friends, Mr. Obama was the man who heckled Mr. Obama was shouting, "Freedom for Ethiopia, freedom for Ethiopia." And Mr. Obama responded, as you heard him say, by he agreed with the man, but asked if they could talk about it later, and said, "You kind of screwed up my ending, but that's okay." He joked. Now, there's a story, I'd kind of like to jump ahead to it. And we'll come back to it because my notes are in a different place, and I need the story notes from one of the reporters to give this story to you on what's happening with the MERS, M-E-R-S, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus that's wildly spreading. Let's first, though, go ahead with some news I have out of Europe. David Cameron has once again insisted he'll hold in-out referendums on the UK's membership of the EU if he remains Prime Minister after the 2015 general election.
Today, just about everyone was talking about Europe, not the EU, but the song contest. Sometimes, just for fun, people vote for unconventional candidates that make a bit of an impression, and the Conservatives are worried that the same thing might happen at the European elections in 10 days' time.
That suggests you would not then be Prime
So
Minister.
partly to limit UKIP's appeal, David Cameron repeated this pledge.
People should be in no doubt I will not become Prime Minister unless I can guarantee that we will hold that referendum.
Well, that's very interesting.
And he said even if he fails to negotiate a new relationship with Brussels, the referendum would still go ahead. It's not surprising he's being this robust. Take a look at recent polling on who UKIP's hitting hardest. It suggests 4 out of 10 of UKIP supporters previously backed the party or didn't support any other party, but 1 in 3 defected from the Conservatives, while only around 13% came from Labour and the Lib Dems. So, unsurprisingly, Nigel Farage repeated his view that David Cameron can't be trusted on a referendum.
Well, he has a difficulty in being believed, because 5 years ago I sat here talking to you about the European elections, and you put to me, well, it's going to be very difficult, Nigel, for people to vote UKIP, because Mr Cameron has given a cast-iron guarantee that if he becomes Prime Minister next year, he'll have a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. He didn't deliver on that.
Labour would hold an in-out referendum only if more powers were to be passed to Brussels, but they know Europe isn't top of voters' agenda.
I'm proud of the fact that Labour are talking about issues like rents, like how do we secure national champions in a dynamic market economy, and I think there's a very clear contrast between a party that is talking about issues that people care about and a Conservative party that are talking exclusively about a referendum.
Nick Clegg said only his party had a clear view on EU membership.
There is now really quite a big fault line about whether you're in or you're out. Of course, we then can have a whole other debate about how you reform Europe, what's wrong with it, what's right with it, how you improve it, but there's a rather sort of fundamental debate.
The Eurovision winner dedicated last night's victory to peace and freedom, but don't expect too much political harmony in the run-up to the European elections.
Friends, now that's from the UK. In Germany, well, what's happening here with our signals? Okay, this year's elections to the European Parliament taking place in just 11, they begin in 11 days from now. This is May 11, Mother's Day here in the United States. A holiday, by the way, Mother's Day, which was initiated by and in the United States, being signed by a United States President 100 years ago today. In 1914, Mother's Day that's the beginning of the holiday for Mother's Day. It began here in the United States. And any of you who are a mother, who are tuned in and watching, I'll give you a happy Mother's Day salute here, and hope you're doing a wonderful, good job with your children. Hope your children aren't giving you too difficult a hard time. All right, now, again, in 11 days, May 22nd, 11 days from Mother's Day, May 11 here, voting will begin to take place between May 22nd and May 25 across the EU, and it'll see an unprecedented battle over the bloc's powers and role. For the first time, anti-EU parties will pose a major challenge in many countries. The vote will be the biggest yet. The 751 MEPs, members of European Parliament, elected will represent more than 5 million citizens in 28 member states. Roland Heintze, an MEP candidate for the ruling Christian Democrats in Hamburg, in Germany, says he doesn't consider extreme left or right-wing political groups a threat as Germans understand the benefit of the EU.
Are you worried about extremist groups more than perhaps in the past?
A little bit more this time, but not so much than other countries at the moment. I think in Germany there are not so strong left or right-wing parties.
Why do you think that is?
The Germans know how important the European Union for them is, and they know what the benefits of it is, and I think so they are not normally also not going very extremely to left or right.
For voters, what do you think the main issue is this time around, if there is one issue?
I think it will be the future of the euro. But today the topic had gone, and at the moment it's a kind of security or foreign policy, because there is a strange situation in the Ukraine, and I think a lot of people feel a little bit worried about that.
And my instinct would tell me that would lead people more to your party, the party of continuity, the party which is so strong nationally.
In the past it was so, and I hope it will be the same as this vote, but I'm not sure at the moment.
Okay, now to the Ukraine conflict we go next, friends. Donetsk and Luhansk vote in self-rule referendum. That's the voting has been taking place in Ukraine's easternmost regions, with pro-Russian separatists claiming a big turnout. BBC reporters at polling stations in Donetsk and Luhansk regions spoke of chaotic scenes. No voting booths in places and no electoral registration. Daniel Sanford reports.
It was a poll held with gunmen everywhere. These were Ukrainian government forces that we filmed under extreme pressure in Krasnoarmysk, just an hour's drive from Donetsk. This evening, at least one man died there. But despite the atmosphere of near civil war, tens of thousands of people turned out to vote. The poll was unofficial, poorly organised and unrecognised by the rest of the world. And in Mariupol, some people voted more than once. But there was no doubting the strength of feeling.
We have to build very big wall, very big Chinese wall between Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine.
Even away from the big cities, we found long queues, like here in the small town of Kurakhova.
Russia, this is a country we want to live with, because the European, it's not for us.
It's difficult to be sure of the numbers, but the queues show that however unorthodox this referendum is, it does have significant support. But many people, like the Kalatventsev family, stayed away from a poll they regard as illegal and a threat to the future of Ukraine.
Of course I'm worried, because it is my land, my country. I love Ukraine hugely, and I've never been as much a patriot as I am now.
Because the poll was organised by the same people who wanted a yes vote, the result will be unreliable and the outcome probably wildly exaggerated. But it could still tear Ukraine apart, and the government in Kiev immediately rejected it.
We do not consider there to have been a referendum, and we don't think this political adventure can be regarded as in any way legal.
The future of Ukraine now depends on how Russia reacts. Even though it seems unlikely that anything like a majority took part in the poll, support from Russia could encourage the activists to go one step further and declare independence. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Donetsk.
Thank you, Daniel. Excuse me, that was Daniel reporting from that part of Ukraine just a couple of hours ago. Earlier, in another part of Ukraine, in Crimea, Daniel has another video report showing how President Vladimir Putin is making his first visit to Crimea since Russia annexed it from Ukraine in March. He told crowds marking the 1945 Soviet victory over the Nazis that Crimea had shown loyalty to a historical truth in choosing to be part of Russia. Here's Daniel Sanford again with this report.
President Vladimir Putin, the first Russian leader in almost 70 years to expand his territory, arriving today in Crimea as Russian Air Force jets roared overhead in triumph. It was the first time he'd come here since he annexed the peninsula less than 2 months ago.
I am sure that 2014 will be written into the history of this city and our whole country as the year when the people who live here made a firm decision to be together with Russia.
And then he stepped out into the crowd of tens of thousands of delighted, patriotic Sevastopol residents. With its long history as the home of the Black Sea Fleet, this is Crimea's most Russian city. It was a display of defiance by President Putin, coming to Sevastopol in the face of international opposition to his annexation of Crimea, knowing full well that the people here supported what he did. Today was Victory Day in Crimea and across the old Soviet Union, the day people celebrate the defeat of Nazi Germany. But with Crimea gone and parts of his country in flames, the Ukrainian Prime Minister said today history was repeating itself, with his people facing a different form of fascism. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Sevastopol.
Okay, Daniel, thank you for that report. Earlier, friends, you heard how one person was killed during today's polling in parts of Ukraine. Another reporter from another part of the Ukraine provides this story on how several people are reported to have been killed, none verified yet in this other city, but reported more people to have been killed in a shootout between Ukrainian troops and separatists in the town of Mariupol. Mariupol. It came as Russia held a huge parade to mark 69 years since the Soviets defeated the Nazis. As you just saw, President Vladimir Putin has flown to Crimea, which Russia annexed in March, and celebrations of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in 1945. The BBC's regional editor, Orrick Solohubinko, has this report.
So far what we know is that there appears to be an attack or an attempt to take over the local police station. There was some kind of shootout, but then Ukrainian armor produced quite a spectacular display, roaring through the streets of Mariupol, center of the city, moving away all the traffic. Shots were fired. They proudly displayed Ukrainian flags, and some locals were very much irritated. They were throwing bottles at the armored personnel carriers, but this is as much as we know at the moment. There are also reports of some people being killed, but this certainly we cannot verify.
All right, friends, I should tell you that report was from Friday. We don't do a live stream on Friday or on Sabbath, but we do on Sunday. And Sunday night here, we have that report from Friday, and this report from today. Pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's 2 eastern regions are holding self-rule referendums. We've reported some on that earlier, but I've got a different reporter on this one. A move condemned this polling, these voting, these referendums in those 2 cities are condemned by the Ukrainian government and the West. Self-proclaimed leaders in the Donetsk and Luhansk areas are going ahead with the vote despite Russian President Vladimir Putin's call to postpone it. The BBC's Richard Galpin visited a polling station in Sloviansk and said there was no checking about whether people have voted multiple times. He suggested that pretty much everyone was voting in favor of self-determination.
So this is the central polling station here in Sloviansk, and what we're looking at here around this area is people registering to vote. Now, essentially, anyone from any part of this region can vote here. You just give your name, an address, you get a piece of paper, and then you get your ballot paper. That's it. So there's no checking about whether people have voted multiple times. And what you do have there, you can just see it actually underneath the passport, is a voting list. But it's an old one. It dates back to 2012. And of course, a lot of things could have changed since that time. But they don't have any up-to-date voter lists for this referendum, which is another reason why the whole legality of it is being questioned. The central government saying the whole thing anyway is totally illegal. Now, as we follow this lady, we can follow, she's just about to go through and cast her vote in the polling, in the booth there. She will do that, and obviously we'll do it in privacy, and we'll come back here and place the ballot paper in the ballot box here. And certainly what we're seeing is that pretty much everyone is saying yes to self-determination for this region. One person we spoke to, one of the voters, said actually what we want is not only full independence, they want to become part of Russia.
And friends, France and Germany are also calling this referendum voting illegal. The leaders of France and Germany have warned of further EU sanctions against Russia if presidential elections fail to take place in Ukraine later this month. In a joint statement, Angela Merkel and François Hollande also said referendums planned for today by pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine would be illegal. Sarah Ransford reports.
Emerging from deep underground in Donetsk. This is Ukraine's industrial east, and many of these coal miners will vote in a referendum on independence. For them, it's become a protest vote against the government in Kiev after weeks of violence.
You can't wage war against the people, but they've done it, and now they've gone past the point of no return.
I'm going to vote, but not to join or break away from anyone. We should sort our problems out together.
But this isn't just about peaceful protest. Armed militia have seized control of official buildings across this region, and they do have substantial support. They claim to defend the rights of Russian speakers against a nationalist government in Kiev. But there are Ukrainian speakers here too, like headmistress Olga Timofeyevna. She tells me her school's been a polling station at every election for decades, but she sees this vote as illegal.
This referendum will not go ahead in my school. They've threatened to kill me and my family, but I won't back down.
So the rebels have been forced to improvise.
This is one of the makeshift polling stations that's been set up here for this vote. This building is usually a private office. In other places, we know people will even vote in tents. The conditions for holding this referendum are clearly extraordinary, but its organisers say this is the only way to decide this region's future. The vote for independence is just the first step. What follows is far from clear. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Donetsk.
And friends, we're going to go over just a little bit tonight. I've got some extremely important stories that we've kind of held up till last here. And I haven't put our chart up on the screen all night tonight yet. Let's put it up, bring it up a little closer. The next couple of stories will relate immediately to the red horse, the horse of the second seal, as depicted in Revelation, as a red horse, and described in plain language by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, Luke 13, Mark 21. And, I'm sorry, I said that backward. Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, where the gospel writers recorded Jesus Christ describing this red horse in plain language as war and rumors of war and world war. And once it becomes world war, we've had 2 rounds of that, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Once it goes into the 3rd round, we're no longer looking at just the second seal of Revelation. Once it goes into round 3 of world war, we are then looking at seal number 5, which has not begun yet, kind of a type we had kind of a type, after the sixth head, and even before that, we've had kind of a type where there's been a martyrdom of saints. You read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you can see that. But what's coming is going to make Fox's Book of Martyrs, a little tongue-tie tonight, sorry friends. What is coming is going to make Fox's Book of Martyrs look pale by comparison to the huge martyrdom that's coming as part of the fifth seal. And also part of that fifth seal, the Great Tribulation, I'll put that back on the screen for you, will be World War III, martyrdom of saints, the crowning of what the Bible calls a beast, which will be a new emperor of the revived Holy Roman Empire. That means the Pope will hold the coronation ceremony for this new emperor over the Holy Roman Empire. It'll probably be done where the past emperors of the Holy Roman Empire were crowned in a coronation ceremony by the Pope in Frankfurt, Germany. The coronation hall, or the Emperor's Hall in Frankfurt, which was, was destroyed by bombers during World War II, was through the Marshall Plan rebuilt for Germany at the expense, courtesy expense of Americans. And we dumb Americans in one way. How little do we know that that very situation will... we rebuilt the hall in which the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, reviving the beast power, or reviving the Holy Roman Empire and into its seventh and final head, we've made all that easy and said we've backed up having one currency in Europe, the euro. The United States has backed that up, setting it possible for the beast to have a monetary union, which makes it easier to have a political union. They get the money working well and the political union working, then they'll have a unified military out of Europe, and an event that triggers something that really rallies them together will they'll eventually, that will be the force. We don't have to worry about Russia sending bombs on the United States. It's going to be that revived Holy Roman Empire that's going to do it and take many of American citizens captive unless we repent. Now, there is a way out of it, friends. God could, prophecies can fail in the sense that if people repent, when God promises something, his promises are sure. But certain things are conditional. When God says, I'm going to destroy you and blah, 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 he says it only if I'm going to do that if you disobey. If this nation were to turn around, then Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, God says, hey, I bless you. You chase away your enemies. You're the head, not the tail. You're the lender, not the borrower. But if you disobey me, all that's in reverse. One of them will chase 100 of you. You will be the borrower, not the lender. You'll be the tail, not the head. And your crops won't grow. You won't have rain. And I won't protect you from the tornadoes and the adverse weather conditions and all that sort of thing. I got 2 more videos I want to show you. Then we want to talk about something on this chart that relates to the fourth seal, where Jesus Christ described it as loimos in the Greek, which means disease epidemics, the pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. And there's more tonight in tonight's news on the MERS virus, and we'll be going with you in just a moment. First, though, let's cover these stories I have for you out of Southeast Asia and the big South China Sea row. The Southeast Asian governments have called on China and Vietnam to end their confrontation in the South China Sea and to resolve their dispute peacefully. Last week, China sent an oil rig into an area of sea also claimed by Vietnam, prompting several days of clashes between Coast Guard vessels. The issue has dominated the summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, being held in Myanmar for the first time. Bill Hayton reports.
These were the largest demonstrations for years in a country that has little tolerance for public protest. This rally outside the Chinese embassy in Hanoi clearly came with official sanction. The authorities want to communicate to Beijing the extent of their anger over the confrontation in the South China Sea. Some in the crowd were eager to express solidarity with their government's position.
We are very angry. We came here today to show that we students are ready to stand beside the government, and when asked to do so, will do everything in our power to protect our nation's sovereignty.
But protests are a double-edged sword in such an authoritarian country, and they'll be kept under tight control. Democracy activists try to use them to highlight the Communist Party's failure to restrain China. Vietnam sent a flotilla of patrol ships to try to stop China setting up an oil rig in the disputed waters. They were driven back by some 80 Chinese vessels, underlining Beijing's growing might in the South China Sea. Vietnam feels isolated and vulnerable in the confrontation with its ever more assertive neighbour. Southeast Asian leaders meeting in Myanmar have expressed concern at rising tensions. They're trying to put on a display of unity in the face of China's claims.
Notwithstanding the difficulties of the future, I'm confident we can accomplish our mission if we work in unity. As the saying goes, unity is strength.
But while Vietnam and the Philippines want a tough statement, others are less willing to challenge a growing regional power that's pushing its territorial claims deep into the waters of Southeast Asia. Charles Scanlon, BBC News.
Friends, Charles has another report besides this one. We've got the video on that also showing a little bit more detail on how protesters in Vietnam have staged large anti-China rallies in cities across the country following a week of tension. And you know what, that video is hung up, but I think we got the idea out of this one. What's interesting about this, though, is that the authorities rarely allow such rallies, so they're being seen as a sign of the level of the government's anger. And we'll be keeping our eye on that. We've been watching that kind of story, and those stories related to the South China Sea row when it was flaring hot between China and Japan for a while. We've been watching that actually for the last couple of years. And the row really goes beyond the last couple of years of news. It goes back for decades even. It goes back even before World War II. But I want to close tonight, friends, with a story about the MERS virus. And I want to show you a scripture or two. But let's see if I've got that. I dug out a camel to go along with this news story. Let's see if I'm able to get that on screen. Yeah, there we go. Got the camels. Because this thing relates to camels, and it's interesting how people, if they just go to God's Word, you could understand one reason for this MERS virus is related to something the Bible talks about that you should not do with camels. And they're missing the whole point. But let me give you the story first. Saudi Arabia has urged its citizens to wear masks and gloves when dealing with camels so as to avoid spreading the deadly MERS virus. The Agricultural Ministry advised people not to come into contact with camels unless necessary, and then to wash their hands if they did. Saudi Arabia is the country by far most affected by MERS. Again, that's M-E-R-S, M-E for Middle East, R-S for respiratory syndrome, Middle East respiratory syndrome disease, MERS disease, with 133 deaths since the virus was detected 2 years ago in 2012. Nearly 500 people in the kingdom have been infected. MERS is part of a large family of viruses. Again, MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, has spread to other countries in the Middle East. One person came to the United States with it already. The disease is a coronavirus, a large family of viruses that also includes the common cold and SARS, S-A-R-S, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. It causes fever, pneumonia, and kidney failure. Now, this is a quote. I'm not saying this myself, friend. This is a quote. Quote, "It is advisable to wear protective gloves, especially when dealing with births or sick or dead camels," end quote, the Agricultural Ministry said in a statement. Now, this is another quote. Bear in mind, I am not saying this. In fact, I'll give you something just the opposite of this out of God's Word. It suggested, this advisory, the Agricultural Ministry, suggested boiling camel milk and only eating cooked camel meat. The ministry's statement, and friends, there's a big part of the problem. The ministry statement comes as research by health experts has focused on the role of the camel as a carrier of the virus. The camel is a central part of traditional Saudi life, and the authorities have only recently linked the outbreak to the animals. Now, some farmers, this is okay. Some farmers have mocked the official warnings, with one posting a video of himself hugging and kissing his camels, asking one to sneeze into his face. Well, now that might be going a little bit far there, friends, but you know, the guy hugging this animal, look, I have a donkey. That donkey will get in my face, and if I'm back there working with him, I have to bend over to the buckets, and the camel, not the camel, my donkey will come up and lick my face real quick, and he gets thrown in my face sometimes. So, donkeys are an animal you would not eat. So are camels. Now, the Agricultural Ministry was saying, boil the milk, and what do they say about the meat? Before you eat it, be sure and boil the meat and I've got it somewhere in my notes here. Just a second. Suggested boiling camel milk and only eating cooked camel meat. If they would look at Leviticus 11, verse 4, it tells us, I was hoping to put that up on the screen for you. It tells us that is an abomination to eat unclean animals, and it specifically tells us that the camel is a forbidden and unclean animal. And that's not just ritualistically unclean, friends. That means God made it. He did not make it for human consumption. He prohibited humans from consuming it because it's not an animal he designed for humans to eat. Verse 4, Leviticus 11. Verse 3 says, "Whatever parts the hoof and is cloven-footed and chews the cud among the beasts, that you shall eat." Nevertheless, verse 4, Leviticus 11, "These shall you not eat, of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because the camel chews the cud, but divides not the hoof. He, the camel, is unclean unto you." That's it, verse 4. And other animals are named there too. But I'm sorry, Agricultural Ministry, you're advising people to I want to say it just like that. You're advising people to boil the camel milk and to only eat cooked camel meat. Shouldn't be drinking that milk or eating that meat, cooked or no cooked. You know, it's an abomination to eat the camel, according to God's word. Again, Leviticus 11, verse 4. Now, I put on the screen here, I've got a few little notes I made. Let's see, where did I do those notes? Okay, the key word in Leviticus 11 about eating camel is that it is an abomination. And, you know, that's A-B-O-M-I-N-A-T-I-O-N. I hyphenated it here just so you could see. It's abomination, it's not necessarily an abomination. But one of the reasons we're having a lot of earthquakes and problems in this nation is because our leaders and our people are not obeying God. And that Leviticus 11 that I was citing to you, friends, it tells us that not only Leviticus 11, but other places. I've got some scriptures up here on the screen. Let me zoom these in where we can all see them, hopefully see them, and I can see them a little better. Leviticus 11 verse 10 tells us don't eat fish that unless if they don't have fins and scales. That's an abomination. These are the things to eat. But then also other abominations, like if we go on down a little bit here to Leviticus 18 verse 22, tells us, you shall not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination. Now again, that's abomination. But, you know, if to be silly or have a little fun, if you wanted to respell that, you know, these people, these government leaders that go around promoting homosexuality and men marrying men or women marrying women, God considers that an abomination. And anybody who supports it, they're advocating abomination. One of our government leaders does that shamefully. Shame on you, Mr. Obama. And one of the reasons you're having to travel around and visit all these cities where we've having tornadoes tear up complete communities is because you're advocating people to go against the laws of God. He tells us men should not be lying with men nor women with women. Now I know that's going to get me a lot of hate email, and but you don't have to watch this program. But I'm telling you what God says, and I'm telling you why we are having some of the calamities that we are having in this nation. It's because of abominations. And let me not just focus that on Mr. Obama. It's, as God called it, abominations, detestable things, perversities, things that God says should not be done. He says they are evil. And by doing that evil, we bring upon ourselves calamities. Because God says He removes His hand of protection. And we have pathways of tornado alleys and this kind of thing. God for a long time has protected this nation. You watch, we're going to have more as He pulls off His hand of protection. We'll have more earthquakes. And all of that is part of what Jesus Christ explained to His disciples when they asked Him, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of this age, this society as we know it? He explained the things that are in these seals of Revelation. We've been seeing the first 4 seals operative, and as they increase, as Christ compared it to the leaves on a fig tree becoming ripe, then summer is nigh. And for us, the nigh summer, the next major event in prophecy to happen is this 5th seal of Revelation, the Great Tribulation, which God promises, friends, you can escape if you're doing what God wants us to do. Christ told us in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching and praying. Those of you who are watching this program, hey, you're off to a good start. But when this program's over, I hope you made some notes, at least mentally in mind, of some of the major news stories, and that you become an active part of the current day's news, as Christ told us to, by getting on our knees and praying to Him about these things we saw, pouring out our heart, learning to have a heart like God, who cried when He saw certain things happening. Like, thankfully, some are very concerned about the young girls, schoolgirls in Nigeria that were abducted and kidnapped. We see famine around the world. We see other things. Christ said this in verse 36 of Luke 21. He said, "Watch you therefore, and don't just watch the world news." And He's talking about watching world news, friends. Yes, we have to watch our conduct too, but in context with what Christ is saying here, reported as saying in Luke 21 about all the events that are going to be happening in these seals up to His return and becoming more and more increased. He's saying, watch therefore and pray always. Be an active part of the events happening. Get in here with me on this, He says. Watch and pray always, and there's a promise. Right in that same verse, He says, that you may be accounted worthy to escape all these things and to be able to stand before the Son of Man. You know, and so you promised an escape, and He tells us elsewhere where our escape will be, to a place in the wilderness that He prepares in the Middle East, in the Jordanian, in a triangular area in which Petra is a part of. And, you know, wherever it's going to be exactly over there, you couldn't book yourself a room or a cave or be there unless God accounts you worthy. You'll get bit by a snake, somebody will abduct you or kill you, or you won't be able to get on an airplane you won't be able to get over there unless you're accounted worthy at the time all of this is happening. But if you are accounted worthy, He'll fly you there, and on the wings of an eagle. You know, now that's a figurative. He could do it literally that way, but, you know, who would want to go that way? Hopefully that's a figurative expression, meaning that we're going to have to flee. He's going to get us through the fleeing and fly us there somehow. Those who are accounted worthy. We'll be saying more on that, friends. I did a longer program tonight because our Sunday night, sometimes we do that, not having a program Friday or Saturday. And but that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining me, God willing, and the creek don't rise, as I like to say. We'll be back here again tonight, Monday night, with the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.